Cadi Withers. I'm the senior manager of facilities management at Colgate-Palmolive on Park Avenue in New York City. So I actually started as a theatrical stage manager, so doing live productions. That was my professional training. I grew up in Southeast Louisiana and moved to the Mecca of American theater, New York City, and got a part-time job in an office. And that I just parlayed that into a career. I started as a part-time receptionist, eventually became office manager, facilities manager, and then director of global office operations for a small startup in the city, an ad tech startup. And then that company eventually was acquired by AT&T. So and then I moved to AT&T and T and then Microsoft. And then now here I am at Colgate-Palmolive. I think that the driving change is definitely technology. You used to say, I'm going to work because you literally couldn't do your work from anywhere else. But now we're just perpetually connected through the internet, through the smartphone. You actually have to actively turn it off if you want to stop working. I think Microsoft did a study that post-COVID, people were spending more time working when they were working from home because they were just always on and always available. And so it used to just be assumed that to do work, you went to the physical workspace. And then when COVID hit, everybody had to go, most people had to go remote. And then coming back from that, then you really had to justify the purpose of the workspace in a way that you never had to do before. It was just assumed that you would just have a one-to-one seat-to-person ratio. If you were hiring someone to work at your company, it was that physically, literally at your company, and you had to have a space for that person. And now that's a question mark. There are some companies that went fully remote. There are some companies that reduced their real estate quite significantly. And some people still are having a hybrid model. And then there are other companies like JP Morgan that said, you're coming back to the workplace. So all of that is really dictated by leadership. There was a lot of conversation in the facilities community among facilities professionals, my peers, when COVID first hit, and then people started to come back from that. And how do we get people back to the office? And people that were in, my role seemed really energized by that question. And everyone seemed to have the best answer. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer X, Y, and Z, and it's going to get people so excited to come back to the workforce. And then it didn't move the needle. And the reality is the thing that gets people back to the office is a leadership mandate. That's it. You cannot compete with the privacy that someone has at home, the convenience that they have to their life. When I think about the term work-life balance, work-life harmony, it used to be how much time you're spending at the office versus how much time you get to spend at home with your family on your personal life. But life still happens at work. Life still happens at the office. And so I think that we need to be thinking about how can we support life when you are at work? Are we delivering privacy by salary grade? Is it only senior leaders that have those private spaces? There are more women in the workforce now than there are men. And as far as anybody can tell, the load, the home load, the mental load, all the things they're doing to balance their house and their family, that hasn't reduced either. So you should have spaces for people to take a private call from a school counselor, the PTA, the pediatrician, your GP, like all of these things are happening at the office. It's not as if this is the 50s and everything at home is managed in the home. It's now managed from both places. And so, we need to support that in the physical world in the office. The great thing about having a physical workplace and the kind of value of that is that you are creating spaces and opportunities for people to go together. And that's the richest form of communication, when you can be in front of somebody and hear their tone of voice instead of assuming it from an email, when you can see their body language. You can get to an answer faster, the richer the method of communication, and the richest method of communication is this face-to-face communication. So you don't just offer a desk, a cubicle, a private office to someone. You have to have a place for them to interaction and spontaneous interactions too. That's how, You can identify young leaders. You can shadow a leader. There would be people leaving. I've heard of people leaving companies because they joined a firm so that they could job shadow and learn from someone senior, find a mentor. And if you're bringing everybody to the office and then everyone is just siloed and they're not interacting, you're losing out on a lot of opportunity for growth and leadership identification. Everybody has different home life situations. I mean, I think about a lot, what would I have done if I was still living in Brooklyn with 3 roommates during COVID and we all had to share the same space? I mean, if people have a bunch of roommates, they'd probably prefer to be in the office. If they've got a lot of things going on, we have the sandwich generation in the office. They're caring for children, they're caring for their parents. It's a relief sometimes to go into the office, and it helps to define boundaries and to just say, this is where I'm going to do this work, and I'm not going to be distracted by the things that pull me, at home. So yeah, and I think that a mistake a lot of times we make, or an assumption we make that is wrong in workplace design, is focusing on uniformity versus universality. So uniformity would be everybody gets the same desk because they're the same salary grade and we offer the same thing to everybody, and that makes it fair. But the reality is people work and thrive and are productive in different ways depending on their personal personalities, their brain, the way that, if you're introverted, maybe you don't like big, high, open ceilings, sunlight exposure to those around you, visual distractions and noise. You like something that's darker, closer, more insulated, and that's how you can be your most productive self. So instead of having a floor plate where you have all of these uniform workspaces, you probably should have a variety of different workspaces, because the reality is your workforce is a variety of different people who can thrive and be productive in different ways. And so if you have a kind of rainbow of options, people will find what works best for them, and they'll be relieved to be able to find that and not have to fit themselves into a mold that doesn't work for them. We have developed a new workspace policy that will be rolled out as we do new renovations. But right now we're working with an older, more traditional work setup. So it's seat assignment by salary grade. And there are private offices which are completely opaque, which I don't think you would ever see built today. So there's no way to see through a solid door. And it's like opaque glass that you cannot see through, and there's no sunlight. I mean, we've had, people complain to me, I think, is there mold? There's some environmental problem in my office because I feel sick. And I just think it's like a casino. I mean, you're not seeing daylight all day long. Like, I don't think that would ever get designed today. We also have these kind of like palatial cubicles where, everyone again is just in their own bunker. And I see an attendance report come through, and it's shocking to find out that 500 people were in the office that day because I saw 10. Everyone's like in their own zone. But we have some really forward thinkers and people that are open-minded. And so in the future, I think that we would design something that's more modern and more focused on the work that people are doing. Again, instead of this kind of like uniformity and assuming that people need a certain space just because we've always had that certain space. I think that the future proofing part lies in the technology. So you have to have this space planning software where you can easily change the function of a space just by how you've programmed it to be, to look, to interact. I mean, it's a lot harder to build or break down a physical wall. It's so much easier to go into a piece of software and say, this used to be a conference room and now it's a private office. And that's how you future proof. You really have to focus not on the individual, not even on the individual team, but really on the kind of like nature of your work and what could it be, and getting all of the stakeholders in a room to talk about that. You shouldn't be designing a space just with you and the designer, the architect. You should also have IT, AV in the room. You should have HR in the room, and everybody should come together to brainstorm, to identify risks, and to talk about the rewards of doing things certain ways. We're bringing everybody to the table to partner together because it's much easier to identify a risk before it becomes a problem in the field. It's much more expensive in the field if you and your designer have selected, for example, a white laminate conference room table. And then once you open up the room, you realize that the reflection bouncing off the camera is interfering with the remote viewer's experience. Well, maybe you could have identified that problem if you had IT and AV in the room when you were designing that space. And that's a much easier change to select the finish with a group of people rather than have to pay for a brand new table. I think that I would say just to it's kind of general, but to stay open-minded, to stay curious, don't assume that you know it all, and to absolutely assume that tomorrow is gonna be different than yesterday. And you really cannot keep doing things the way you've always done them. Grace Hopper had a great quote like that. She said, "The most dangerous phrase in the language is 'we've always done it this way.'" You really have to evolve and keep evolving.